Step number 6 is closing the sale. And closing the sale is simply, I'll give you the simplest of all closing techniques. It increases people's sales by 5 or 10 times, and it's called the invitational close. The invitational close says that when you have made your presentation, you ask the customer this question: how do you like this so far? If the customer says, well, it looks quite good, you say then, why don't you give it a try? Why don't you give it a try? When you ask a customer the invitational close, the most powerful closing technique ever discovered, why don't you give it a try? The customer can only say, well, sure, I'll give it a try. Or they can say, well, no, in which case you ask, why not? Why not? Now, a second closing technique is called the reverse close. And when a prospect says, why don't you give it a try? And the prospect gives you an answer, you say, if we could take care of that for you to your complete satisfaction, would you give it a try? So you say, if we could, would you? If we could satisfy you on that, would you take it? The prospect says, yes, if you could satisfy me. You say, then what would it take to satisfy you on that point? The most important word in life for success, the most important word in sales is the word ask. Ask politely, ask confidently, ask warmly, ask charmingly, but ask for what you want. Ask the customer to take it today. Ask the customer, invite them to buy. Ask them why they're hesitating, but don't be afraid to ask. Remember, before you ask, the answer is probably no. If after you ask, the answer is still no, you've lost 10 seconds out of your life. So don't be afraid to ask. And the more you ask politely, ask confidently, ask courteously. The more you ask, the more confident you'll become, and the more sales you'll make. The second part of listening is to pause before replying. Is when the person stops talking, pause. Allow silence in the room. You see, we say that selling takes place with the words, but buying takes place in the silence. If the customer does not have enough time to process, then what happens is they don't have enough time to buy. So when they finish speaking, pause and let them think, and maybe they'll want to continue, or maybe they're finished talking. But when you pause, you tell the person that what you said is very important, and I'm thinking about it before I respond. If a person says 1, 2, 3, and you say 4, 5, 6, A, B, C, D, yeah. If you respond immediately after a person has finished speaking, what are you actually saying? Is I don't care about anything you said. I was just waiting for a chance for me to speak. But when you pause, you tell the person that you really care about what they're saying. Step number 3 in listening is to question for clarification. Never assume that you know what the customer really means. The most powerful words in sales in every language are the words, how do you mean? Or how do you mean exactly? I'm doing this, or I'm doing that, or I want this, or I want that. Well, how do you mean exactly? It costs too much, or I can't afford it. How do you mean? Whenever you ask the question, how do you mean? The customer will expand and give you more information. And then you can say, well, how do you mean exactly? Every time you ask the question, the customer will tell you more information. They'll express themselves. They'll give you more information that you need to make a sale. And each time you ask a question, you get a chance to listen, and listening builds trust. The fourth key is to feed it back in your own words. Is don't just jump in with an answer. Say, well, let me be sure I understand what you're saying. This is what you're doing now, and this is what you're trying to do in the future, and this is your concern or your question. Is that right? And they'll say, yes, and this is proof that you were really listening. And people are immensely flattered when you can feed it back in your own words. So those are the 4 keys. Listen intently, pause before replying, question for clarification, and then feed it back in your own words before you speak. So I'll give you a technique, by the way. This will double your income. This technique is so powerful. It's been found that the top 10% of salespeople in 32 industries use this technique. And you teach this technique to people, and they won't use it. But in every audience, I say, does anybody use this technique? And there's always be somebody. I'll say, how does it work? And they'll say, It's like their seat was electrified. Customers love it. I mean, and it's a very simple technique. It's called the agenda close. The agenda close is where you close the person on an agenda. So, for example, what you would do is you would say, Mr. Prospect, I know how busy you are, so I've prepared an agenda for our meeting. That now positions you as a professional. It positions you as a consultant. An agenda. You see, only professionals use agendas. Non-professionals go in and just talk. So what you do is, I've prepared an agenda for our meeting, and you take a piece of your stationery, this is Nordic Business Forum, and you write agenda for meeting with the person's name, correctly spelled, very important, and the time and date. And then you have 5 or 7 questions. Odd numbers are better than even numbers. 7 is one of the most powerful cosmic numbers. So I always think in terms of 7s. So you have 7 questions. And so I've prepared an agenda for our meeting, and you space the questions over the page so a person can take notes. You write it in large print so a person does not have to get a magnifying glass to read it. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, customers are astonished. They take it like this, and it's got their name and their time and their business on it. And they sit, and then you have a copy yourself. You say, if we can just go through these questions, then you will know and I will know if this is a good idea for you or it's not. And at the end of the series of questions, you say, well, it looks like what we're offering and what you need seem to fit together pretty well. Can I show you some of the details? And then you shift gears and you shift into the presentation. Now, just like identifying needs accurately is the turning point or the hinge on the gate or the door, the presentation is where the sale is made. You make the presentation by presenting your product or service in a special way. And this is worth $1 million to you over the course of your career. This one piece of advice is, people don't care what your product is. They don't care about you. They don't care about your company. They don't care about the background of your company, and they don't even care what the product is. People don't care. The only thing they care about is what this product or service does for me. You know, if you have a little child, the child says, me, mine, me. All customers care. They're just children with better excuses. All they think about is me. What do I get? What's in it for me? And what they want is, they want a change in their life. They want an improvement in their life, a result, a benefit, or highest of all is a transformation. They want to be transformed. There is an ABC theory of motivation that applies to selling. And A in English stands for antecedents, or what happens in the past. B stands for behavior, and C stands for consequences, what happens as a result of buying. Here's the rule. 15% of buying behavior is determined by the past. 85% of buying behavior is determined by the anticipated future. What is going to happen as a result of me buying? So, as we say, if you are selling a tour to the Canary Islands, spend 90% of your time talking about the destination and only 10% talking about the plane that you fly to the Canary Islands in. Most salespeople spend 90% of their time talking about the plane and only 10% of the time talking about the destination. Imagine if you went to a travel agent and you said, I want to take a vacation to the Canary Islands, and they said, well, let me show you how this plane works. And they take out a diagram of the airplane you're going to fly on, and how you walk up the rampway, and where you sit, and the food they serve, and the movie. You think, I don't want to hear about this. I just want to know about the islands and the palm trees and the ocean and the warm water and so on. So talk 90% about the change that will take place in the customer's life.